Hey there, Independent Scientologists! Discover a new perspective to your bridge by visiting ao-gp.org. Get in session with remote auditing using the theta meter. Are you curious about where you stand? Head on over to ao-gp.org now and take our free personality test. Join the growing group of independent Scientologists today.
Hi, and welcome to another AOGP Outside of the Church podcast. This is season 8, episode, what did we say, 6? Isn't that right?
6, yep.
6, episode 6. It's been a while since we've done a podcast because we've both been so busy. I'm here with Quentin Stroud. Quentin, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We're ready to go.
We're ready to go. The title of this one, going to be a controversial one. The title is, what is it, Quentin?
Sacrifices of Sea Org members. What is going on? What's really happening with the Sea Org?
Well, and there's gonna be some interesting viewpoints here that our listeners might be a bit surprised about. But we're going to start off with what LRH's intention for the Sea Organization. The Sea Organization is an organization of individuals that get recruited by the Corporate Church of Scientology to oversee the administration of the Scientology organizations, of which there are a myriad number of organizations. And his viewpoint was to put people there who would sign up, and we're going to circle back to this in part 3, who would sign a billionaire contract to oversee the administration of technical delivery and all of the 7 division organizing boards in Scientology. And there's multiple organizations, one on top of the other. And he does this where you sign a contract and you get paid $50 a week and you have to sell all your stuff and you don't have a car. Used to be you could have a car in the 80s. You can't even have a car now. So you basically become what in other circles like Church of Latter-day Saints, you become a permanent missionaire almost in the Sea Org. And they supply you with food and they supply you with, a roof over your head, 3 hots and a cot kind of thing. But you only get paid $50 a week, and anything and everything that can go wrong did go wrong with the Sea Organization, and we're gonna get into that now. I would also like to state that I'm not going to make a blanket statement and say that everybody in the Sea Org is bad and everybody in the Sea Org is suppressive. That is not the case. That is not the case at all. Misguided, lied to, gaslit, and a few other things. I would say that is the case, but their intentions and LRH's intentions for the Sea Organization, I think his heart was in the right place, and I think there are an awful lot of people whose heart is in the right place. But if I were to say that the biggest issue is that Sea Org members have, those who are still in, those who have gotten out, saw the writing on the wall and said, "See ya," is they can't confront evil. Otherwise, the Corporate Church of Scientology wouldn't be in the state that it's in. That's my take on it. It's very difficult to confront.
Well, and from my understanding, I mean, I'm not a Sea Org member, never have been, but from my understanding, that they're commissioned and charged with keeping LRH Tech, in making sure it's working. Like they have like some of the highest responsibility on that whole point. And so as a true Sea Org member, if even the credo of a true group member, like if you see something out, you're supposed to do something about it. Like there's supposed to be a, like, let's get this handled, let's get this sorted out,
Right.
And that's not happening necessarily. Like we need to talk about it, I think.
Yeah, and I was just thinking when you were saying that, I'd also have to say that if it weren't for Sea Org members, I wouldn't be here today doing what I'm doing. Period.
Same.
Period. Okay. And so this isn't a bash on Sea Org members podcast. That's not the point of it. The
Right.
point of it is to give people a better understanding of it, and that um, when you take somebody's stuff and you tell them they can't have a car, and they live on $50 a week, and they've spent 30 or 40 years of their lives, they kind of don't have any choice. And they start out with their heart in the right place, and they want to help mankind and spiritual salvation, and all of this stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that most of the people get in for the right reasons, because that's what's presented to them. However, what's presented to them and what the reality is are two different things, and that's not their fault. But there's also underlying issues that we've gotten into in other podcasts and things like that. But when did it start going in a different direction? Well, it started going in a different direction practically from the onset, and I think that was just when the cat's away, the mice will play. LRH couldn't be in every organization where there were Sea Org members at any given time, and in the beginning there were just a handful of them, and they came to the U.S. off the flagship Apollo, and then started recruiting once they bought the flag land base in Clearwater. So it was a handful of people, and then eventually became, gosh, I'd probably say somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 plus. I don't think it ever got any higher than that at any given time, but it started going in a wrong direction, because you're dealing with a bunch of individuals, and this is a quote that I give from Pierre Ethier, who was like 40,000 hour auditing in the chair in the Sea Org, was in the Sea Org for over 30 years. And he said his viewpoint was, where the Sea Org went wrong was most of the people that were recruited didn't even have high school educations.
Yeah.
Let alone college educations.
Well, it's interesting because when it's a very different world, and I'm speaking from someone who grew up Jehovah's Witness. I'm speaking from someone who understands spirituality from a broader perspective and come at it from a different angle. I'm not really big into organized religion per se, but when you when you know something, you know it, right? And it's it's not always necessary to have these. Now, obviously, I think that there's something to be said for people who go and get a degree and use their degree to help build an organization or however they work it. But I think that when I look at Sea Org members, and every Sea Org member that I've encountered in my personal journey has been a positive experience. But when I look at them, there's a level of duty and a level of dedication and a level of commitment that is astounding to me. Like, it really is. And I think that when we look at when the Sea Org started going in a different direction, it started looking like it became a little bit antagonistic, or maybe Scientology became more antagonized as a whole. But wherever it started becoming a thing, it started now seeming like we're training a militia, a military department versus.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It became militant.
Yeah. I'm wondering, was that a response? Was that the way LRH intended it, or was that a response to when Scientology started getting attacked more and more and more and more and more and more and more?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of different influences on that type of a thing, and Scientology got attacked, and LRH says, you always go on the attack from a PR standpoint. When somebody attacks you, I mean, you have to, and just because we were talking about this yesterday, just because he put this stuff in writing, and everybody says, well, with what he said, you have to attack, or we were talking about fair game. and he put it in
Oh yeah.
writing, whereas other organizations don't put it in writing, or they hide it, but they still do the same thing. I mean,
Hmm.
you see it everywhere. I mean, the way corporate structure is set up, it's kind of militant.
Right.
And that's no different than the Sea Org, but LRH was operating from a viewpoint of having been in the Navy, and he's interested in ships, and wanted to kind of create his own kind of Navy that went in his direction. That's what his son Quentin said is, Dad likes ships, I like airplanes. I mean,
Hmm.
so that you get in that direction, but the thing is that when you go in that direction, when you get into this militant thing, well, because you're going to get something done. Well, okay. Well, you can also get something done by auditing people. But the thing is what he ran into, and why he created the L rundowns, was that it's a long runway to audit somebody to get them up to a point to where they can get things done. And that was the point of the CRG, was to get things done, because you have these people who are dedicated. They don't have all the distractions of, 2 kids, a wife, and 2 cars and a house. All they have is, the clothes on their back, $50 a week. They're supported. And I mean, you know what I'm talking about. I mean,
Hmm.
this is how you get something done, is that you're just 24/7, 365. You do this thing.
You're focused.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're focused because you don't have any. I mean, this is why they created Unix, you know?
Well, hold on a second, because I was just about to go there. So, okay, so let's talk about it, right? Let's really, really talk about it, because I lived in Thailand for quite some time, and often, maybe every 2 or 3 months or whatever, I would go over to the Buddhist temple, and I
Mhm,
would give offering to the Buddhist monks or whatever, because they they weren't allowed to have any earthly possessions,
mhm,
and so you literally they could not have any money, and they literally had to go and ask people for things. So in Thailand, you would literally see Buddhist monks in the morning, usually like right at dawn. If you go get them some coffee, we had a little coffee shop down the street from our condo, and we would go down, and you would see Buddhist monks going from business to business, asking for. And they wouldn't ask; they would present themselves, and the business owner, in order to have a good, prosperous, lucky day for the business, they would give the monk some food, or they would give the monk some shoes, or they would give the monk whatever they had for their business, right? They would give the monk something, and so that's how the monks got their belongings. Well, then we would go to temple, and if we wanted the monks to pray for us, or if we wanted the monks to kind of sit with us or whatever, chant with us or whatever, we would have to buy these basically care packages,
mhm,
and it would have tissue and milk, eggs, whatever, like everything they would need to survive, like stuff that we take for granted. Like if you need tissue, you just go to the store and buy tissue.
mhm,
They couldn't go buy tissue. So they had nothing, right?
mhm,
And but yet we freely and willingly and lovingly went to go give um, these care packages and money too to the monks for their service.
mhm.
To me, that wasn't weird. To me,
Yeah,
that was beautiful. To me, that made total sense. And they would sit and chant and whatever, whatever. And yet, in America, in commercialism and the whole thing, they'd be like, "Oh, they only make $50 a week," and like,
right.
if that's what they're choosing as their game, as their experience, as their life, that's how I wouldn't choose it. I'm just telling me
Mhm,
personally. But
mhm.
if that's what they're choosing, I totally get that. Just like I would get that from the Buddhist monks who shave their head and walk around with nothing but a orange robe.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's by American standards, but I mean, what is a Catholic priest? How do they live?
Well,
Uh,
they get salaries though, from if I'm not mistaken.
Okay,
Don't they get a
so
salary?
yeah, I think we have one public that's a Catholic priest. I'll have to ask him. But I
Yeah,
mean, from what I saw on Zoom and everything like that, he had a nice house and everything, and he
yeah,
and he ran the whole church, and all that stuff. So, but
yeah.
that's, I mean, you're distracted by all this other stuff, so you got to get these things done. But one of the biggest problems in the Sea Org is getting auditing, getting training, because you get 2 hours a day for personal enhancement, which is one or the other. And typically you would get trained on whatever your job hat, your job manual, to use non-Scientologies for our listeners. So it could take you years to learn your hat at 2 hours a day. And that's quite literally what happens. So you're not getting any, unless you're a trained auditor, your training as an auditor, and you have to have a certain amount of auditing in order to deliver the auditing that you're going to deliver. A lot of people don't get up the Scientology grade chart in the Sea Org. So is it any wonder that things ended up the way that they did? And I did a podcast with Ray Robles back in 2010. And I mentioned this in another podcast, but it bears repeating, that in 1973, he had a Sea Org member approach him about, I think it was San Diego mission or org or something like that. And the Sea Org member was asking Ray Robles, why are you auditing your staff? And he said, what do you mean? I mean, they're supposed to get auditing. And the Sea Org member said, no, dummy, you don't do that, because if you do that, they'll leave.
Okay.
And I'm saying this for a reason, okay? It's not just what he said to Ray Robles. It's that he said it at all. And this is
why was that his viewpoint, though?
Well, because his viewpoint was that if you give somebody their abilities, which auditing and training can do, you give somebody their abilities, they won't want to stick around. So do you see what I'm saying? Is it any wonder that the Corporate Church of Scientology ended up the way that it was? That in 1973, this would have been 4 or 5 years, 6 tops, that the Sea Org had been around. In 6 years, let's just say it's 6. In 6 years, they had already developed the viewpoint that staff enhancement and getting people auditing and getting the people up the bridge who are helping other people get up the bridge, and those people that are helping other people get up the bridge should get auditing as a reward for helping people get up the bridge, so that they can get people up the bridge quicker and they have more abilities.
Better, yeah.
Instead, it was the prominent viewpoint was, and I'm not making this a generality, I'm saying it's a prominent viewpoint. This is just the example, but it is manifest that this is what is going on because of where we're at today in the Corporate Church of Scientology. If people had gotten the auditing they were supposed to get and had gotten the training that they should have gotten, David Miscavige would not be in power today.
Right. Well, so how much? So they're supposed to get 2 hours a day. Is that what I'm hearing? 2.5 hours a day, right?
Two, yeah, I think it's 2 hours a day. Yeah.
Okay, I know usually a course period is like 2.5 hours. So okay,
yeah,
so something like that. So they're supposed to be doing that 2 hours a day, and then they're supposed to do their staff hat 2.5 hours a day, right?
Well, they only get that time, so they have to do all of their post training first, whatever's required of that, and that's going to take years to do, and because if you figure
Like 2.5 hours a day,
yeah, I mean,
nothing.
that's like 2 times 300 is 600 hours. I mean, but the thing is there's all kinds of other things where people don't get, and it's not a perfect system, and most people don't get their staff enhancement every day. That was another problem that I saw, that they didn't get their staff enhancement because it was more important to go out and make the organization money than it was for you to get trained. You just had to get your instant hat, which is, go out and dig those ditches and get them dug this many feet deep and this wide, go.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you end up with, long story short, what it comes down to is they recruited people who were unqualified. They recruited people who were not educated. They recruited people who did not get educated while they were in there. Not all of them, but a lot of them. because they would take anybody that would sign that billion-year contract. My viewpoint on
Speaking
it
of,
is, huh?
go ahead. Uh-huh.
My viewpoint on it is it was a great idea, but it's a flawed idea. And again,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the Sea Org. So don't go sending me hate mail. I'm just
Right,
saying,
right.
if it had worked, we wouldn't be independent Scientologists. That's my personal opinion. I wouldn't be, but there were just, and the other thing Ellerate says, that if you ever have a problem with the tech, it's not the tech, it's the personalities involved. That's the problem I have, is the
Mm-hmm.
personalities involved. And those personalities could have been resolved with auditing. They could have been resolved with helping each other out. They could have been resolved with not being in cliques and stratifying themselves, where these guys in this organization in the corporate structure would not fraternize with the guys in the lower organization. There's no room for that in Scientology.
Well, it's not workable. It's just not
No,
workable because you don't have you don't have that level of ARC that's necessary for things to actually go
right?
smoothly most of the time, you know? And
Right.
so, I mean, if you know your fellow man, if you know your brother, you know how to then engage with them in a more structured setting because you know that person's personality. You know when they make a little joke or if they cut their eye a certain way or whatever, they're not, like whatever it is, like that person's personality in such a way where it's like, now I'm not triggered or now I'm not, but there's no ARC break. So yeah,
Yeah.
when I look at this thing, I look at it at, you just mentioned about the billion-year contract, and I think it's so interesting that's a thing, and that so many people, like in the world, like so many onlookers will say, oh, they make you sign a billion-year contract, but then these same people that would gasp at that thought don't believe in past lives, or say they don't believe, they YOLO, you only live once, whatever, right? So they'll say like they don't really believe that you have multiple lives or whatever, or you have multiple experiences.
Yeah.
But then they'll say, "I can't believe they make you sign a billion. If you don't believe it, why you so thrown off by it? Who cares?"
Yeah.
Like, I just think it's so weird how people like pick and choose when they want to gasp. It's
Yeah.
like,
Well, I signed one, and here I am doing this on the outside.
yeah, you're still serving. Like you still doing what you committed to do.
Yeah. I'm just doing it without having some megalomaniac telling me what to do, because I know a zebra when I see one.
Yeah, I just think that this is such an interesting, and when you compare comparable data and comparable experiences from, I mentioned about the Buddhist monks, and you mentioned about the Catholic priests and stuff like that. They make a vow of celibacy where like you ain't doing nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then if in Scientology there's no vow of celibacy necessarily, but if you get pregnant or something like that, then you might have to, release that, terminate that pregnancy or whatever. Like, so there's different things. I'm not saying that's a policy because it's not, but
Yeah.
there's a thought that there's some pressure around it. And when you look at the controversies around Sea Org members and the
Yeah.
sacrifices that they have to make in order to serve this higher good.
Yeah.
But all I'll say is that for me and my viewpoint on it is that every every religion has their um dedicated servants, the dedicated parishioners, the dedicated we that operate on a higher level. When I was in Jehovah's Witness, there was like levels, right? There's something called being a publisher, where you basically served about 25 hours a week,
Mm.
and then you went up to a pioneer, where it's 60 hours a week. And then above that would be like an elder, and then above that would be like a Bethelite. And a Bethelite is you basically Sea Org. Bethel
Mm-hmm.
in Jehovah's Witness was Sea Org for Scientology. And it was like this, like you give your entire life over. My cousin is a Bethelite. My cousin is there still to today and had been there since I was a kid. So, what, almost 40 years now, 30, 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
serving his entire life and never gotten paid a salary, but still eating every day. He gained a little weight. Like
Hmm.
he didn't miss a meal. You know what I mean? So it's like it happens. It happens.
Yeah. Well, and there are Sea Org members that have been in for, wow, 50, 60 years. And
Yep.
the way they treat these people, I mean, they don't let them go. I mean, they basically lock them up and keep them in a secluded, sequestered area, and don't really take care of them. And that's the unfortunate thing, is that these people aren't revered for the work that they've done and lauded for the work that they've done. They're just cast aside. I don't think LRH had anything to do with that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that could have been improved with the Sea Org, as far as the viewpoint of, a being in a body is a being in a body. Just because they're a kid is just because they're a kid, and all of this stuff. I think things could have been handled better. I think they could have been done better. And it's unfortunate that it has gotten the repute that it has. A lot of the repute that it has gotten isn't because of anything Hubbard said. It's because of what's happened since he left, and how far off the rails it's gone, because it has gotten into human trafficking. It has gotten into incredibly wild, out ethics things with people's lives, where they never ever get any exchange. I mean, all of the things that are in Scientology that should be understood and practiced should be done to the people that are delivering this to other people as well. There is
Hmm.
the problem, and that is what has not happened. And if it had happened, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And I think that people need to understand
Why
that.
why aren't other Scientologists that are a part of the corporate church or whatever, why aren't they more vocal about the way Sea Org members are treated, or the fact that they're not going up the bridge, or the fact they're not, like, why aren't they more vocal about it? In other words, say, hey, why can't Johnny go get some extra auditing hours this
I'm
month or whatever?
I'm going to blow your mind when I say this.
Mm-hmm.
Stockholm syndrome.
No, that didn't blow my mind. I get it.
Yeah. Because if you say, your boss should be treating you better, you're out ethics.
Hmm.
That's what you would get. That's what you would get. You dare say something about the chairman of the board? Blasphemer.
Well, I hear that. I think that for me, like, I I've encountered a lot of Sea Org members, and I've heard the stories. I've all of it. I know all of it, right? And yet, it never really. I guess I never thought about it as my fight, right? As
Mhm.
something that I consciously wanted to take on,
Mhm.
because it was like, okay, if this is the game they're choosing to play, if this is the way they're choosing to do it, who am I to come? Like, who am I to say, no, you need to be treated better? Like, no, I guess that's
I,
my
I
own
I know what
viewpoint,
you're
right?
saying. Yeah, I mean,
Judge
why
not,
why are
lest
you
ye be
letting people treat
judged.
you this way?
Right. Like, who am I to say that that's not what you want? I would say the same thing to the Catholic priest. If you can't have sex for 50 years, 60 years of your life, and then you drop body and you going on to glory or whatever, I would say, why you do that?
Mhm.
That would
Right,
it
right.
would be something I would want to miss out on. But
Who chose
so
this?
who am I to say that you should be having sex? Or who am I to say that, who am I to say you shouldn't let your hair grow out as a Buddhist monk? Like, you want to, they keep shaving your head. Like, I guess, I don't know. It doesn't, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
interesting.
well, it's what people tolerate, but it all comes back to what Hubbard says, that there's only two ways you can be wrong: being there and communicating. Who
And
signed the contract? Who put up with people yelling at them and punching them in the face and making them stand in 55-gallon drums of cold water while they were derided by all of their friends and coworkers? And this was not something Hubbard came up with, but this is what happens. These are the reports.
hmm
I cannot confirm or deny it, but this is what I've been told by numerous people. You know,
allegedly.
allegedly. I've dealt with Sea Org members, and I have absolutely 100% sworn off in ever dealing and working with former Sea Org members in Independent Scientology ever again, because of the things that I have experienced that I think were directly from what they experienced. I worked with a couple of them and was trying to help everybody in the vicinity where we were at this place in Georgia. And I was told, "You're the FNG." I was like, "What's FNG? You're the fucking
What's
new
that?
guy. Shut the fuck up." I'm like,
Oh,
"Wait, what?" You know, and this is a guy that worked at the Flag Service Organization for years in the qualifications division. FNG?
I
I
understand.
mean, if that's not toxic for a
And I said,
workplace,
I'd be like, and you the B&B, you the black and blue guy, because
you're, yeah, I
I'm about to
just,
go off.
yeah, and call me provincial, but I did not see that one coming from somebody who's supposed to be a class 9 case supervisor. Haven't you heard of the funny little triangle called the ARC triangle?
Mm,
Sort of things like that. And that's where the disconnect is. How do these things coexist? Well, they don't. That's the problem. And herein lies the issue, is that they're not practicing what they preach. Not all of them, but I mean, they tried to recruit them young so that they're malleable and you can tell them what to do and everything like that. When I was in, there were a lot of people that were in their 40s and 50s and 60s that I dealt with. It's hard to find anybody in the Sea Org who's that old anymore.
mhm.
They've either died or they left because the situation. I mean, LRH says in the blow-offs HCOB, there's only two reasons that a person leaves: is that the situation is so bad they have no choice, or they have overts and withholds. But that first one is the first on the list. So that's something that needs to be looked at too. But at the end of the day, the Sea Org is valuable, at least from my standpoint of where you and I are, but it isn't valuable to the degree that they haven't done something that nobody ever did anything to stop what happened to corporate Scientology. And
Right.
those are the sacrifices that Sea Org members have. And I mean, the hours they put in, 80, 90 hours a week type of a thing. And, they get a couple hours off to do their laundry on a Saturday morning. And the bus rides that we used to have to take on these decrepit old broken down buses and everything, and it was like sardines in there, and nobody's deodorant was working because they couldn't afford a decent deodorant in the Florida summer. And it's like, this is the best we can do for these people who are delivering somebody's spiritual eternity. Something's wrong here. And that's why I thought it'd be good to do a podcast to say, don't shoot the messenger. It's not me, it's not Quentin. There are an awful lot of people out there, and I've tried to find them on Facebook, people that trained me and things like that. I can't find them. That these people knew their stuff and they were really, really good at what they did. And they deserve to be recognized. They deserve to be taken care of. And they're not. And that's not okay. And they should not be blamed for something that, well, I mean, they didn't take any responsibility and get rid of Miscavige. They didn't stand up to him or whatever. I'm not going to make people wrong for that. I mean, they should have, but they didn't. Okay,
Well,
fine.
listen, my mama used to say, I'm from Alabama, so we talk plain. My mama used to say, "You made your bed hard, now you got to lay it."
Yeah, yeah.
So, what
It's
y'all gonna do? Because the truth of the matter is, just like every other major industrial age or industrial revolution kind of thing. I mean, we can go back all the way to the Boston Tea Party. A revolution can change a lot. Norma Ray, she stood up on the conveyor belt and she was like, strike, 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 And so like if they really want change, if they do, they can make that happen for themselves. They are at cause on that level. Um,
If they
and if
want
they
to be.
don't,
Hmm.
right, exactly. And if they don't, who are we to say that they should live any differently? I think it's a very, very interesting topic, and I would love to interview a few Sea Org members just to get some perspective. You know, uh, the things that I think most Americans at least worry about, because I think Sea Org is bigger in other parts of the world, based on some research that I found. But as far as numbers go, but in most developed nations and stuff like that, like you the first thought is how much money you making. The
Hmm.
second thought is how long are you working for that money you're making,
Hmm.
right? Hours,
Hmm.
you know, hours or pay or whatever, hours versus pay. And I think the third thing is probably treatment. Like how are they treated with your bosses or your superiors or whatever. Um, that's in every conversation I've had about this, that usually is the way the flow of it, right? How much
Yeah.
they how much they get paid, how many hours they be working. They be working hard. They work hard for $50 a week. Da, da, da. And then, oh yeah, and they treat them shitty, you know, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Or they can be treated shitty sometimes. So,
Well, and some
you know,
people like a
that's an
challenge.
interesting viewpoint. Right, right. Yeah, that's the way I look at it too. I just look at it as something different for different strokes for different folks, and different people choose that level of service.
Mhm.
And you can go across almost every major religion and see that there is a priestly class. There's a class of people that serve in a capacity that's far above and beyond, or way beyond, where most parishioners or most practitioners see themselves serving,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. Well, and
So
it's you know, I can't say what they tell them up front anymore. I know what they told me up front, um, when I was, hit up to join the Sea Org and stuff like that when I was younger and everything. And I mean, I saw what they had to go through and things like that, and I was just like, no, thank you. And
yeah.
it eventually came up that I had already had, and this isn't what I signed up for. No thanks, and I'll go do what I think would be the best way to go about it.
Well,
AOGP and
yeah,
all that.
would they just tried to recruit me for serving in the org? Like the first question I had was what we were talking about was pay, and they kept that nobody could answer my question about the pay, and
Hmm.
it was like,
There's a
and, you know,
reason for that.
and there's a thing. Oh, let me have you talk to somebody in personnel. Let me have you. I said, listen, it ain't that complicated. I want to know
Hmm.
how much I'm getting paid. Like that was my first question. That was the only reason why they could never get me. Like they could never get me on staff. But I was at FSM, and I was a very good FSM because I knew how much I was getting paid off jump. Like I knew how to I knew how to structure my service and my support to my staff, not my staff, my field member, the people who I wanted to help out, my selectees. God, why can't I
Hmm.
get that word? Um, I knew how I wanted to support my selectees, and then in supporting my selectees, I knew what the exchange was. So that was easy for me to grasp. All that
Right.
other stuff, it was wonky for me. I can what happened? I get a credit. What's the credit? I couldn't understand it.
Yeah. Well, and that's because it is staff pay is in class 5 orgs is so low. And
Yeah.
that's the unfortunate thing, is that I think that it should have been structured to where everybody could make a decent living, and it wasn't.
Right.
And that's where I think things went wrong, because if auditing does what it's supposed to do, and it does, if training does what
Hmm.
it's supposed to do, what's the problem?
Right.
I mean, why wouldn't I want diamonds for peanuts? Sure, okay, but
Yeah.
it wasn't, and I think that's
Well,
part of
but
where
now,
things went wrong.
according to what you're saying, hmm but according to what you're saying, they're not using the best and the brightest, or they're not, you know, what's that old saying? If you want to chop down a tree in an hour, spend the first 45 minutes sharpening the axe. And so,
Right.
if they're wanting to really get things going, I would spend most of my day sharpening the axe
Uh, uh,
first.
I would
And
gladly,
then,
I would gladly train 5 auditors and say, look, I'm going to train you and everything, and you're going to get paid this, and this is you're gonna help find people to audit and everything, and then once you get going on it, you're going to be making this. Okay,
yeah,
and that's that, and there's a pay structure and a bonus system, and you get rewarded for your
yeah,
production and all this stuff, and it's not this units thing like it is in a class 5 org.
units. That's what it was.
It just doesn't work because of the organization and the way that they do
Right,
things. It might have worked had it been given a chance, but it wasn't because it was used. It didn't have a chance to even get off on the right foot because, well, I mean, like Hubbard talks about exchange, there's criminal exchange, there's equal exchange, and then there's exchange in abundance. Why doesn't that apply to the people that are delivering it?
right. Well, Mo, let's also talk about it, that we're also looking at um 1950s economic structuring versus 2024 economics, right?
Yeah, 74
And
years later.
right, and inflation and stuff like that. But I think the idea was around LRH doing it that way was that regardless of what happens with the economy, if these units are representative of this amount of percentage of the income and stuff like that, or whatever, no matter what we're bringing in, it makes sense. What I don't think was really factored in is that when you're talking about 1970s and taking us off the dollar, off
Hmm.
the gold standard,
Gold standard,
and
yeah.
then you talk about the 80s, and then we had the booms of the 90s with the Clinton and the whole bit, and then you got like there was so much that happened over the last 70 something, like 75 years almost, that yeah, it ain't the same. Like we can just look at housing now.
Hmm.
You can't even work at the org and afford decent housing. But
Yeah,
back then
yeah.
you could.
They all have
Like,
to live. I
like
mean, they've been having to live together for the last 40 years because they couldn't
yeah,
afford it.
you could have bought a house back in the 50s, pretty nice house for like 8,000 to $10,000.
Yeah.
Not no more.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. My mom and dad had a house they were paying $250 a month that they purchased in
That was
1974.
my first house too. My
I
first
mean,
house was in Alabama,
uh,
$250 a month.
but look at what it is now. I mean, it's nothing's been adjusted for inflation. I mean, you just go on and on and on.
Yeah,
It doesn't make sense. It's no wonder things have turned out the way that they have because nobody has a chance to survive and do well out of the gate. I mean, they're always behind the 8 ball, so to speak.
yeah.
So,
Well,
so what have we learned from all of this?
what I'll say is this: my takeaway from all of this, and if anybody who got to this point in the podcast is listening, like just understand that there are different levels of um, experience, and there are those who choose to operate in different levels of service or whatever, and uh, that goes from the military who would give their life in exchange, for their country, to protect their country or defend their country. That includes religious orders, not just Scientology, and of course Sea Org members. They are people who will always do that, and I think that if we look at it from that perspective, we don't go into it with this lens of judgment. We go into it with the lens of, okay, I get your viewpoint.
Mhm.
Now let's talk about what you need. Like what can I do to help? What can I do to support? What can I do to be there, right? And as independent Scientologists, what we do is we focus in on really helping you get up the bridge, really helping you become more productive, really getting you trained so that you can be and do those things that you choose to do
Mhm.
and work with. So that's my viewpoint on it. And hopefully, um, this was a conversation that kind of highlighted why that's so important.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to point out that we've never had a former Sea Org member come to us and say, I want to continue on doing Scientology, independent Scientology. Not one. Nobody's
Hmm.
ever approached us on that in that wise. And I'm not making this up. And there's a reason for that, and it's probably because it's left a bad taste in their mouth as to what it is, not what it was intended to be, and all of that. And different strokes for different folks. And there's some wonderful, wonderful people that have been in the Sea Org, and I'll never ever forget them. And they changed my life unequivocally, and opened my eyes to an awful lot of things. And they I kind of look at them like some people look at people in the military. And they shouldn't be made wrong for what they did, and they should be lauded for it and appreciated. And there's a lot of good in it, but it's a wrong target. They're just doing what they're told, and maybe they don't know any different with what's going on now. It's not Hubbard. And he wasn't perfect either. But the thing is I think that there's a better way to do it. And we're here as independents because there's one other way to do it, and we're trying to do it that way. So for Quentin and I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. I think it's a thought provoker, and we'll be back real soon with another podcast. I'm going to throw an idea by Quentin when we get off here about something that's more political that we can do a podcast on. So take care. We love you, and namaste.
Peace.